We are all products of our environment that we grew up in when we were little kids. We got our culture from the neighborhoods that we stayed in. We got our traditions and our morals and everything that we've learned on how to be an adult from the homes that we grew up in. And then we take those along with us on our journey as we mature and grow up. Some of you are saying, Coach, what does this have to do with the Minnesota Vikings in football? I'll tell you, and we'll discuss it on the UP.
I don't know who I am. Can I say?
Powered by Riverside FM.
Man, we should be counting our lucky stars where we are as an organization right now. And I know it doesn't feel great. J.J. McCarthy has been injured for the past 2 years. There's a lot of criticism going around against Kevin O'Connell and his play calling and his situational play calling. I've been there with him. You guys know that watch my videos. People are frustrated that J.J. McCarthy can't play. Carson Wentz again will be starting on Thursday night. People are becoming exhausted viewing that stuff. But with all that going on, where we are right now, 3-3, pretty decent head coach, pretty decent front office, personnel, maybe not the best in the league right now, but we're sure one of the better teams on paper when it comes to talent. We should be happy. We could be the New York Jets, UP Nation. 0-7, Aaron Glenn as the coach right now, not doing very well. Quarterback stinks. Quarterback stinks worse than Carson Wentz in terms of Justin Fields, although I don't put it all on Justin Fields, but the fact is he's not getting it done there. We could be that. We could be that. We could be the New Orleans Saints right now that are struggling to win football games as well. We could be that, but we're not. We're 3-3. We've got Kevin O'Connell as our coach. We got Kwesi Adofo-Mensah as our general manager, and we have a pretty good ownership team in the Wilfs. So you ask yourself, well, Coach, what are you talking about? Listen, man. Let me show you a pitfall that could be coming. In the intro, I talked about family. You get your family traditions from the household kind of that you grew up in. And you learn pretty much a lot of the things that you know today from your mom and your dad or whatever household you kind of grew up in. You take all of those cultural things and insightful things and things that you learned as a little kid in that house. And when you leave the nest, you take it with you where you go. That's kind of how most family and people operate. Here's my fear with the Minnesota Vikings. And we are not there yet, but you got to keep your eyes on it because it's valid. It is a valid concern from the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of the Minnesota Vikings, the important people that are making decisions about this football team, do you know where they come from? They come from an organization that I grew up watching as a kid, the Cleveland Browns. And I can tell you right now, the Cleveland Browns are one of the worst run professional organizations in the world. In the world, UP Nation. I'll give you a prime example of what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't follow the Cleveland Browns, do you know that the Cleveland Browns right now have been so undecisive about quarterbacks that they're paying 8 quarterbacks right now, from Joe Flacco to Deshaun Watson to Dylan Gabriel to Shedeur Sanders? Like they're DTR. They're paying all of these guys that aren't even paying for them anymore. So it kind of shows you the chaos from the Cleveland Browns. Well, did you also know this, that a lot of our guys that we have in important spots came from the Cleveland Browns? Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was an assistant GM, in my opinion, to one of the worst GMs in the league in Andrew. So now that Kwesi is kind of in this job and Cleveland was his home, it's where he cut his teeth, where he learned pretty much everything he needed to learn to become a GM from Andrew Berry and the Cleveland Browns organization. Do you really want the traits and the things learned in one of the worst organizations in sports transitioning to the Minnesota Vikings organization? That's a possibility, man. It could explain the drafts that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has had. Where did he start? The Cleveland Browns. Think about that. Think about that, UP Nation, Purple Gang, Skull Nation. Kwesi is an important piece of the puzzle, and he started with the Cleveland Browns. I won't stop there. Mike Pettine is another figure, assistant head coach for the Minnesota Vikings, used to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Again, I'm going to throw it out there. One of the worst organizations there is. There is. Every philosophical thing, his first head coaching job ever with the Cleveland Browns. And everything that he learned, all the ideologies that he learned, the philosophies, the traditions. And now he's the assistant head coach to KOC. What sort of things did he learn in the Cleveland Browns organization that he's able to give solid advice to KOC in certain situations? See, you have to think about things. This is not throwing shade on the Vikings, but the situation is what it is, UP Nation. When you grow up in a certain type of home, you bring those transitions, you bring those traditions, you bring those philosophies with you along the way on your journey as you mature. It's just fact. It's just fact. Kevin O'Connell, Cleveland Browns. Quarterbacks coach. We all know that Kevin O'Connell has had success rehabbing quarterbacks. But again, another person for the Purple that cut his teeth and learned early in his career from one of the worst organizations in sports, the Cleveland Browns. It's gotta concern you. And what it does, it's not saying that the Minnesota Vikings are inevitably going to become the Cleveland Browns, man. That's not what I'm saying. And again, we should be lucky with where we are, because those things could manifest itself way earlier than what may be projected. For right now, I think our organization is running things pretty good. Could they improve some things? Absolutely, yes. All I'm saying is where they came from, we need to be a little concerned. When you look at how long the Cleveland Browns have been bad, there is a culture of stupidity and a culture of not being able to get things done that has permeated through that franchise for a long time. You could argue they have never recovered from moving to Baltimore. They haven't been really good. I mean, they've had a couple of shining moments, but they haven't been really good since moving to Baltimore. Since 1999, the Cleveland Browns have had 41 starting quarterbacks. There's always been turmoil and a lack of getting players on the field and picking the wrong franchise quarterback 41 times. 41 times. And whenever there was a level of success, they got rid of the quarterback that gave them that success. For example, Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield took the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs, won a playoff game, and then within a year's time, Baker Mayfield was gone from the Cleveland Browns. All of the physical, the physical proof that he showed on camera in games, the Browns just didn't think very highly of. So now he's doing it elsewhere, more specifically with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he is in the MVP conversation. So there's always been that turmoil at quarterback. The Minnesota Vikings have kind of had a revolving door at quarterback, not as bad as the Browns, but they have, like the Cleveland Browns, they have yet to find a franchise guy. That's why J.J. McCarthy in that draft pick becomes so important. It's another bite at the apple. The Cleveland Browns have had plenty of bites at the apple to be able to find that franchise quarterback, and they have failed. They have failed. The Minnesota Vikings have had sort of a revolving door at quarterback, but they have yet to really find that guy that's going to be with them for 10 to 12 years like the Cleveland Browns, that traditional franchise quarterback. We're hoping that J.J. McCarthy is going to be that for the Cleveland Browns, but we don't know. But again, I'm just drawing parallels between the Vikings and the Cleveland Browns. We have yet to do that, kind of like the Cleveland Browns. And quarterbacks that have shown promise, like the Cleveland Browns, we've kind of gotten rid of. You can look at Case Keenum. You can look at Sam Darnold. All of the evidence. Just trying to tie these parallels together. Future pitfalls, UP Nation, that can happen. We don't want to go down the road and become the Cleveland Browns of the NFC. Both teams have supposed geniuses as head coaches. Kevin Stefanski, former offensive coordinator Minneapolis Miracle, Case Keenum, now the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. One of these young, innovative coaches. Offense right now is not living up to what it's supposed to be for the Cleveland Browns. Kind of like KOC, young, innovative, offensive head coach. Offense is not living up to what it's supposed to be. Same parallel as Kevin Stefanski and the Cleveland Browns. Man, it's interesting to think about. Andrew Berry, the GM for the Cleveland Browns, young, innovative, thinks outside the box, an analytical GM. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah worked under him as his assistant. He's the GM of the Minnesota Vikings. Same young, think outside the box GM, relies on analytics like Andrew Berry. Man, I'm just trying to tie all this stuff together. It's similar. It's similar. The Minnesota Vikings have to learn, because they were in that home, rather than taking some of those traditions with them in the future to the Minnesota Vikings organization. The Minnesota Vikings need to learn from the mistakes of the Cleveland Browns, man. I'm hopeful, because if they tie in those traditions and if they tie in those philosophies within the Minnesota Vikings organization, I think there's a level of concern. I think we're sunk. There is a level of concern. Again, my level of concern in this is because I grew up in Cleveland. I still keep an eye on the Cleveland Browns, but I know how bad the organization is. And we've got so many important people that make crucial decisions for our franchise that came from the Cleveland Browns. And I don't think a lot of Minnesota Viking fans, UP Nation, Skull Nation, Purple Gang, I don't think you realize how many people came from the Cleveland Browns that are now in our organization. And slowly but surely, as I have pointed out, certain parallels or similarities are starting to creep up. Very rarely do you get a chance to change the past. You can look through the window of mistakes that maybe people have made in your lives or people have made in certain sports organizations, and then you have an opportunity to go elsewhere and change. This is what the Minnesota Vikings must do. They must stay away from the traditions and the philosophies of the Cleveland Browns. Man, there's so many parallels, and it's crazy. It is why where we are right now, we should count our lucky stars, because we could very easily be the Browns and the Jets. But there are some things, UP Nation, that are creeping up. Don't take my word for it. There are so many parallels you can find when you look at the Cleveland Browns organization and the Minnesota Vikings organization, and it is a direct correlation between staff members that spent time with the Browns that are now working within our organization. And not only are they working in our organization, but they are working in decision-making organization. They are working in decision-making positions. People are head of the department. People are making decisions in the draft. People are making decisions in free agency, and they cut their teeth in one of the worst organizations in sports, in my opinion, the Cleveland Browns. I mean, man, just look at the chaos that's going on over there. They can't figure out their quarterback situation. They arguably have their best quarterback on the bench. They traded Joe Flacco to a inter-division rival who you're trying to beat. Those type of boneheaded decisions. So I thought about this last night, man, and I just said to myself, like, this thing can start to go downhill really fast. I hope it's not. I hope that the level of self-evaluation with Kwesi and the fellas and Wilfs and KOC B-Flow, I hope these guys understand the pitfalls that may lie ahead, and they stay away from all of the traditions and all the philosophies that they may have learned from the Cleveland Browns organization, man. There's just so many parallels, so many similarities. Just had to get on and talk about it, man, as Thursday night approaches. I know a lot of people are kind of down on the purple right now, looking at a lot of the social media stuff. There's not a lot of people that are looking forward to this game on Thursday night because Carson Wentz is playing. Man, we just got to stay the course. It could be worse. The minute you start getting down on the purple, think about the New York Jets, think about the Cleveland Browns, think about the New Orleans Saints, think about those franchises. We could be there. And I'm still here supporting the purple. I'm just aware of the pitfalls ahead. And I wanted to make UP Nation aware of the possible pitfalls ahead with this franchise and where a lot of our decision makers came from. The Cleveland Browns. Just let that sink in for a little bit. This has been Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate you. And as always, we will see you when we see you. Skol!